Broncos Country, we have got two genuinely massive storylines coming out of training camp that deserve the full breakdown, and both point toward the same conclusion: this team is building something the rest of the NFL is not remotely prepared to handle. We are talking about a three-headed run-stuffing monster along the defensive interior that could make Denver's already elite pass rush completely unblockable through committee. And we are talking about a receiver room that has genuinely legitimate top-5 upside in the entire league, anchored by a specific breakout candidate who might be the most underrated storyline of this entire training camp. Let us break down every piece of it. Start with what is happening along the defensive line, because the specific combination of Malcolm Roach, DJ Jones, and Zach Allen creates a genuine interior wall that opposing running games are going to struggle to solve. The numbers from last season back this claim up completely. DJ Jones finished third in the entire NFL in run-stuff win rate, which is exactly what you expect and want from a nose tackle whose entire job description centers on controlling the interior. Malcolm Roach finished 7th in the league in that same category, despite functioning purely as a rotational piece rather than a full-time starter, which raises the genuinely exciting question of what happens to his production now that he steps into an expanded role. But the most fascinating name in this equation is Zach Allen, who, according to DJ Jones, has been genuinely unblockable throughout training camp. When asked specifically about his new role as a starter, Allen delivered the kind of confident declaration that gets a fan base fired up. He is not giving that job up for anything, and good luck to anyone trying to take it from him. Add in Tyler Burnetta already showing genuine run-stuffing ability throughout camp, and you have a defensive front that creates a genuinely fascinating strategic problem for every opposing offensive coordinator on Denver's schedule. Here is why this matters so significantly beyond just the raw statistical profile. Denver has led the NFL in sacks over the past 2 consecutive seasons, which means opposing teams are already forced to game plan specifically around avoiding that elite pass rush. The conventional counter strategy to an elite pass rush is establishing a strong running game that forces the defense to respect the run and creates more manageable down and distance situations that reduce pass rush opportunities. But if Denver's run defense is genuinely elite as well, that conventional counter strategy simply does not exist as a viable option. Teams cannot escape the pass rush by running the ball if the run defense is equally dominant, which leaves opposing offenses with no clean answer, regardless of which approach they choose to attack with. The honest data from last season reveals exactly where the vulnerability existed and why addressing it specifically makes sense. Only 2 individual running backs cracked 100 rushing yards against Denver all season. Jonathan Taylor with an outstanding 165 yards in Week 2, and James Cook with 117 yards during the divisional round playoff game. But looking at the broader trend across the final 3 games of the season, Denver was surrendering an average of 145.7 rushing yards per game, which reveals that opposing offenses were finding sustained success on the ground down the stretch, even without any single running back producing a truly explosive individual performance. That late-season trend is precisely the specific weakness this defensive line reconstruction appears designed to address. The schedule context makes this improvement even more critical, because the running back talent Denver faces in the opening stretch of this season is genuinely elite. Kenneth Walker in Week 1, Bashal Tutin in Week 2, Kyron Williams in Week 3, Christian McCaffrey in Week 4, Omarion Hampton in Week 5, followed by Javonte Williams and Zach Charbonnet in Week 6, then Jeremiah Love and Tyler Allgeier in Week 7. That is an extraordinarily difficult gauntlet of opposing ground games, and the quarterback talent Denver faces during that same opening stretch, Patrick Mahomes, Trevor Lawrence, Matthew Stafford, presumably Brock Purdy, and Justin Herbert, means the defense absolutely cannot afford to let opposing running games control tempo and field position against that caliber of passing attack waiting behind them. If the run defense holds up the way training camp evidence currently suggests, Denver puts itself in position to force elite quarterbacks into obvious passing situations against an already dominant pass rush, which is exactly the kind of complete defensive identity that produces championship-caliber results. Now let us shift to the offensive side of the football, because the wide receiver room conversation deserves genuine and serious attention beyond typical training camp hype. Courtland Sutton remains a legitimately excellent boundary receiver who wins 50-50 contested situations at an elite level. Jalen Waddle brings the kind of smooth, dynamic superstar production working the middle of the field that immediately elevates any receiver room he joins. Marvin Mims continues developing as a genuine deep threat weapon, but the name generating the most legitimate excitement right now is Pat Bryant, and the specific case for his breakout deserves the full explanation. Bryant's usage is fundamentally changing this season, with head coach Sean Payton specifically indicating he will operate from both the X position and the slot depending on the specific package being deployed. That positional flexibility matters enormously because it means opposing defensive coordinators cannot simply assign a single matchup answer to neutralize him. Payton's specific praise centers on Bryant's hands in traffic, his footwork through contested catch situations, and his run-after-catch ability, combined with the football intelligence that makes moving him between the X position and the slot a genuinely simple adjustment rather than a complicated schematic challenge. The statistical foundation for believing in this breakout is genuinely compelling. Bryant posted a red zone target share of 12.1% last season despite barely being targeted during his first 6 weeks as a rookie, which represents a significant number for a player who was not even a consistent part of the offensive game plan early in the year. His zone coverage separation numbers were already strong, generating 1.22 yards per route run despite spending considerable time blocking rather than running routes, with an 18.1% target rate specifically in zone coverage situations. If that zone coverage target rate climbs into the range of 22 to 23% this season, with his red zone target share potentially jumping to 15 or 16%, Bryant's name is going to be called constantly inside the 20-yard line throughout this season. Combined with reports that he has added weight specifically to reduce injury risk while already showcasing legitimate downfield ability during camp, the profile emerging looks genuinely similar to a younger version of Courtland Sutton, which is a remarkable comparison to make given that the actual Courtland Sutton remains on this same roster. Think through what this complete receiver room actually creates for opposing defenses to solve. Sutton winning 50-50 contested situations on the boundary. Waddle providing that smooth, dynamic superstar presence working the middle of the field. Bryant emerging as a nearly unstoppable zone-beating weapon out of the slot with legitimate red zone dominance developing. And Mims stretching the field vertically as the genuine deep threat. There is no clean defensive answer to that combination. Bo Nix is going to have a legitimately open receiver on essentially every single play call this season, regardless of what coverage shell the defense presents. The organizational self-awareness on display here deserves real credit too. This coaching staff specifically identified the drop problem that plagued this wide receiver room last season as a genuine flaw and attacked it directly through both personnel development and scheme adjustment. That kind of honest self-assessment followed by decisive corrective action is exactly what separates organizations that improve consistently from organizations that simply hope problems resolve themselves. The case for this becoming a legitimate top 5 wide receiver room in the entire NFL is not homer bias or blind fandom. It is a genuinely defensible analytical position built on real statistical evidence and real reported evaluations from inside the building. Denver's defensive line is building toward genuine dominance against the run to complement an already elite pass rush, creating a complete defensive identity that gives opposing offenses no clean strategic answer. The wide receiver room has legitimate top 5 upside with Pat Bryant emerging as the breakout name every Broncos fan should be watching most closely throughout the remainder of camp. This team is building something genuinely special heading into 2026, and the rest of the NFL should be paying close attention. Rate the Broncos' defensive line performance so far in camp from 1 to 10 in the comments right now. Tell us if you are on the Pat Bryant bandwagon after everything broken down here, and let us know if you think this wide receiver room genuinely cracks the top 5 in the league this season. We are live tomorrow for the Hall of Fame game with a Jalen Waddle jersey giveaway, so make sure you are subscribed and ready to join us. Broncos Country Mile High salute. Be cool.